as you know, Philip is teaching while the rest of us eat lunch every day. And he always sends these very sad notes. Gee, I wish I could come to a faculty forum, but alas, I'm working because the choir is so dedicated, and so forth. And so I've asked him a couple of times, and he said, I can do it if we can do it the last week of school. So here we are today. And I'm so grateful to hear his story. I know it's an interesting one that we'll all enjoy, so please welcome
Thank
Philip.
you. Well, thanks. Glad my wife Tammy could make it today, and that was a rare treat for me to have lunch and for her to come and be able to see her too. Susan asked me, I was really at a weak moment. I knew that the last week I would be okay to do this, but at that time I didn't have a concert booked on the same night. Tonight, big concert, chamber singers. So in the Rotunda, big little plug for that. In fact, there's probably some students wondering where I am that we're not rehearsing, but they probably didn't remember that. But anyway, well, I was telling the students at my house the other night when we were having a party how my life has been so influenced by people in their early 20s. Even 18, 19, 20, 21, 20, almost all my life. Starts with my parents when they were in their early 20s, long before I was born. And they moved to Vienna, Austria in 1961. And for most of my life, I guess up until I was about mid-20s, I just thought, well, Dad was a missionary in Austria. I really didn't know any more than that he was a missionary in Austria during that time. My oldest sister, sorry that's real blurry, that was taken with an iPhone on a snapshot back about a year ago at a reunion. But my oldest sister, Carol, was 6 months when they traveled to Austria, and then my second sister was born there. And then I was born a few years later, and there I am. My dad's in the top of the picture there holding me, and then Gwen Hensley, he's a big name with EEM, if anyone have heard of that name. They were sort of partners in crime together, and I found out relatively recently, you'd think I would have known this growing up, but I really didn't, that they were smuggling Bibles into Soviet countries the whole time. I didn't know that. Vienna was as close as they could get to the Soviet Union and to Soviet-controlled countries. And so they would have them printed in Vienna. And of course, they worked with the church there in Vienna as well. And they would make trips into these countries with a suitcase full of Bibles, nothing else in it, just Bibles. And they would exchange suitcases with a contact there, carry an empty one back. If it took them 5 or 6 days, that's how long it took them. They didn't have anything else but their suitcases that were full of Bibles going over and empty coming back. That was one way in which they did it. 2 years ago, it was EEM, Eastern European Mission's 50th anniversary, and this little clip came out of one of the newsletters that my dad wrote. He said, we were just a bunch of 23 to 24-year-olds fresh out of college and still very accustomed to dormitory pranks. We're somewhat reliving our college days when we could figure out ways to get Bibles into the Eastern European countries. So the first trips were actually just made on the train. We'd get a visa, buy a train ticket, stuff our pockets with these smaller Bibles or suitcases or both, and try to get as many Bibles as we could into Eastern Europe. Then as we made those trips, we also made a lot of acquaintances. We found some underground churches and a few individual believers, and they wanted to assist with the Bible distribution. So that was where I was born as a part of that. In 67, we came home. We came to Amarillo, which I consider home, when I was 2 years old. This picture, I think, my brother said 1977. Thanks to Facebook, all these pictures are available. People post things from their past. So I went to my brother's account and found that. That's our happy family in Amarillo. My two oldest sisters went to Harding, and I thought I was destined to go to Harding. My senior year in high school, one of the ACU faculty members just called me all the time and wouldn't let me off the hook. And literally, so I was recruited to go to ACU, and that's where I ended up going to school. Also about this time, a little bit before that, we lived in Austria for a short time, for about 6 months. So I spent my part of my fifth grade year living in Austria, went to school, picked up some German, never got it really fluently, but got to where I could understand quite a bit and speak and get in bad trouble. there was a lady there in the church in the 70s who was from Hungary, who was a refugee. If you know the political landscape at the time, Hungary was really controlled, even though it was a separate country with its own government, it was really controlled by the Soviets. And she was a refugee out of Hungary, came right into Vienna. She was a concert pianist. Her name's Eva Ott. She took me to the Vienna Symphony often. I still remember hearing Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. As a fifth grader, as a 10-year-old, she gave me my first baton. I had no idea I'd actually need a baton in my career, but she gave that to me. So in this picture, I made a trip with my family to Austria in 2005. My parents were living there at the time, then serving as vice president of EEM, and got to see her again and had this picture made. So throughout the house, by the way, Ava Ott came and lived with our family after we spent some time there in the 70s. And when I was 6th, 7th grade, she came and lived with us for about 3 or 4 months, taught piano lessons. In Vienna, she was actually a teacher at the Viennese Conservatory, teaching piano. She was working on, at our house at that time, the Beethoven Pathetique Sonata. So I grew up hearing this amazing sonata, and this was my favorite part of it. If you were in my music lit class yesterday, you would have had this on your final exam. Oh, we could keep going. I hate to stop it. Oh, I hate to stop it. That brings me back to Amarillo in the late 70s, hearing Ava Ott play that. I heard that recently played live by a high school student. It's just an amazing piece of music that really has strong memories for me. Go back here. Also, during these years, I was being very much influenced by college students at Camp Blue Haven, and you're seeing familiar faces up there. Even though I didn't come to ACU, people at LCU highly influenced me. John Jones, Kent Rhodes is there, David Goodnight, Craig Howard is there, second from John Redden. Craig doesn't look like that much anymore. But Kent Rhodes really kind of looks the same. There's some other guys in there, Terry Thomas and Tammy could tell you who all their names and rattle them off. These guys had a tremendous influence on me. It was here at Camp Blue Haven that I really started to develop a faith of my own for the first time. There's another picture there. I don't know who the guy in the kid-eye shirt is.
Roy Davis.
Okay, yeah. I remember the name now, immediately. So John Jones, Kyle Degg, they're all right there. Yeah, Marcy. Yeah, Marcy, David.
There may be Jeff Deakins on the far right.
By the way, these are all on Facebook. There's a Facebook Blue Haven Boomers group, so I got that Kyle put together before he passed away. So Blue Haven, this is a picture of one of the campfire scenes at Blue Haven that I took a few years ago. It was really through my friendship with Jonathan Witt, growing up in Amarillo, who used to teach English here for us, and we're still very, very good friends, although we don't see each other very often, except when he comes to town here and there and makes a surprise visit. But his dad, in his 20s, founded Camp Blue Haven, Scotty Witt. 1956, about the same year that LCU was established. The first summer of operation in Blue Haven was 57. Thanks to Scotty Witt, Jonathan's dad, who had the first dream for Blue Haven in his mid-20s. Huge influence on, no telling, countless people's lives. People who've come to faith in Jesus Christ through what they learned at Blue Haven. People who found their spouse at Blue Haven, as I did. Lloyd Massey had a tremendous influence on me. This picture was made not too long ago, also an LCU alum. Is that right? He was my music teacher when I was a camper, 6th session, years and years ago, and really had a tremendous influence on me. When I was a little bit older, 1920. I was actually 22 years old. I was trying to make a major decision in my life and was teaching at Blue Haven, along with Lloyd this time as a colleague. He and I were teaching together. And he had just a way of shooting straight with me and really caused me to deeply think seriously about a decision that was lifelong, a life decision, and tremendous influence. 1985 was the year I graduated from high school, made a little Europe trip with these guys. Jonathan Witt's right there. Jay Richards, if anybody knows that name, he's a part of this big think tank that puts out lots of books, and Intelligent Design used to be the name of that, but I think he's maybe moved on to another organization. Jay is on the far right there. Then we also went to Greece. There I am on Mars Hill. And then a few years later, at the same place. I don't think anything's changed, really. Right? No change. Pretty close.
The hill looks the same.
The hill looks the same, yeah. Choosing a major. This is a true story, but I see God so much at work in all these events that put me here at this place. So I showed up at ACU. And a few months prior to that, during my senior year, I went and auditioned for the choir, and they asked what I would major in. I said, well, I'm not sure, but I am pretty certain it's not going to be music. And they said, okay, and they made a scholarship offer to me, and I've wondered since what I would have gotten as a scholarship if I had declared music at that point that I auditioned. But my mom had been a piano teacher. I'd struggled through piano as a kid and not had a real good experience with that, mostly with personality with the piano teacher I had, I think. But, and just nothing against her, but I was probably a horrible student and was told that frequently. But, so I told them, it will not be music. I showed up for registration during the summer, that summer registration time. I thought, Dad's had a computer business in Amarillo. I think I could probably major in business, and went to the business school, and the line to register was so long. Maybe business not for me. I thought, well, Dad has a degree in Bible too, and I've felt called to the ministry. I thought, well, maybe I could do that. Went to the Bible building to register as a Bible major. It was twice as long. Twice as long. I thought, well, I can't imagine my life without music. So I showed up at the music building. There were two people. Burt Brack was one of them ahead of me. Two people. Music is for me. Registered as a music major. Now that's true, and I don't want to make light of that decision. I thought, freshman year, everybody changes majors anyway at that time. I thought, I'm just going to check it out and see. I had some serious doubts along the way. Am I really going to be able to contribute something with a career in music? I really had some strong questions about that. But the more I was involved, the more I caught the bug, and I couldn't imagine myself really doing anything else other than ministry. I wanted to be involved with ministry as well as music. Well, I had an opportunity to do some of that. During that time, I was in His Singers, 1989. You might notice I'm on the right there. On the far right, there's a girl sitting rather close to me with her hand on my leg. I was actually engaged at the time. That was the lifelong decision I was dealing with that Lloyd Massey talked to me straight about. Also, my grandmother had a deep influence on me. We wrote letters back and forth. Remember when we used to write letters and put them in the mail? Yeah. I have a stack of letters from my grandmother. She died a few years back, but I still have a stack of letters from her that had a huge influence on me. One statement she says, Philip, we've been married 63 years. When it's right, that's not nearly long enough. Deep influence. Well, part of the bug that I caught in music were the campaigns that I went on. The first campaign I went to was to Honduras, and this one is a picture of going to Bolivia. This was with World Campaigns at ACU. Dr. Dan Coker's there on the right with the beard. He would preach in Spanish. We would sing in Spanish, and I would train the chorus. I had maybe I'd had 3-hour course already in conducting, and I'm not sure if I had conducting yet or not. It didn't matter. I was the course director, and I directed them to sing in Spanish. Some of the students in the choir were from ACU, some of them were from Harding, some were from Oklahoma Christian. They were just students who wanted to go on a campaign together. And very organized. There weren't that many of them that could really sing. Some of them had good background, but a lot of them couldn't. And I thought at that time, man, what would it be like if I took a group of students that could really sing, that really had some ability and background and experience? What could happen then? Of course, then I didn't have a whole lot of experience and knew a little bit about what I was doing, but not much. And so it was kind of reciprocal, went both ways there. So that at that time, I had a dream to be somewhere at a Christian university to be a choir director, and that was 1988. And of course, I had started school 3 years prior, so that was a good timing there. From ACU went to Arizona State. Broke up with, we had a breakup there with my fiance at the time. That was not a happy time. It was really, really difficult, really dark time. Terrific girl. It wasn't working between us. So I'd go to Blue Haven. I'd see Tammy. Of course, there I was in my good-looking duds. And Tammy, by the way, the whole time we were at ACU, she was at ACU with me. We have completely different circles of friends from ACU. Don't have the same friends at all. If she knew them, I didn't. If I know them, she didn't know them, which is kind of interesting. By the way, over homecoming week, I told Michelle this. She spoke in chapel about her memories of Lubbock Christian. I think there were 2 or 3 others that week that went to school about the same time, in the mid-'80s, early 80s, or something like that. I heard y'all talk about your experiences at LCU, and I thought, man, I kind of missed out. I had some great experiences at ACU, don't get me wrong, but part of it was I was dealing with such hard things. I had a great education, but I thought, man, and things would have been so different. Who knows how things would have ended up? But part of me felt a little envious about that experience you had at LCU, to be honest. But I was getting tremendous experiences that whole time as a counselor at Camp Blue Haven. I'd been a camper all those years. Went back to be a counselor. Tammy and I were counselors together. I think we said hi to each other a couple of times that first summer we were counselors. She had been dating someone else that time, and we finally figured it out, and we're married in 1992. 1992. So I started teaching right away after finishing my master's degree at Arizona State at Brownfield High School. There were a couple of things that happened after we were married, and Tammy doesn't think about this a lot. We don't talk about it much anymore. But she was in medical school. She was a third-year resident right after we married, third-year student, doing rotation. So third-year medical school, they're actually going around following, and she can tell you a lot better than I can, but following various aspects of clinical practice. And she was doing, I think, a surgery rotation or something related to surgery. And 3 months into it, she came home. She said, Philip, she said, I had a needle prick today. She was cleaning up after around a patient's room, picked up a paper towel that had been left out. There was a needle inside that paper towel, pricked her finger. The needle had been used for an IV or for something in the patient. Patient had hepatitis and could have had HIV. And at that time, if you remember 20, 25 years ago, AIDS was on the news every day. So she came home and tells me, 3 months into our marriage, that there's a possibility she could develop AIDS. So she got tested every month for a year, and thank God that there was never any problem. And never any problem from that, but that was very, very stressful. 2 years into our marriage, I was teaching at Brownfield. I had forgotten to, she was on call on a Sunday morning, and so she couldn't go to church. I went to church. They called me the newlywed bachelor at church, by the way, because she was always at the hospital. And so I had forgotten the checkbook to make a contribution that morning. I knew it was in the car, in her car. So I was driving to the hospital, and I arrived at the hospital, but not the way I wanted to. Had a pretty serious car accident. There were a number of things that happened related to that accident that are hard to explain. Things that were told to me that Tammy can tell you more details because I was out of it. I woke up in the hospital, like I said. A pickup just ran a red light, got broadsided, was hurling towards me and landed on top of my car. Evidently, in my state of semi-consciousness, unconsciousness, I was hollering out to the medics looking after me, "Where's my friend? Is my friend okay?" And I was so emphatic about that they went back and checked the scene to see if there was somebody else in the car, see if anybody else was in there. Then when I came to and I was finally coherent, I remember my dad being there and asking me, "Philip, was anyone in the car with you?" I said, "No, I was by myself." I don't know what happened. A friend of mine in Amarillo wrote a little story about that. It's sort of like the drama in real life out of Reader's Digest with a spiritual bent to it. He wrote a little story that's published in this book, Miracles and Mysterious Visitors. I don't know. The chapter heading is my friend okay? And I thought, wow, is that me? He writes this whole story about that. But if you're interested, I don't know. It's a lot of interesting things that happened. One thing that happened in that car accident, I had my Bible with me. I was headed to church, and still use this Bible from time to time. It's sort of one I kind of grew up with and wrote a lot of notes in. I have a lot of blood in the Bible that I've kind of kept with me because it's been part of that. My heel was crushed in that accident. I occasionally still have a limp from that. But so there's some little pages there. Somebody's told me how to clean that up. I'm thinking, I don't want to. It's just kind of a part of me. But I realized a year or two later that, wait a second, the place where there's the most blood, I thought, is there anything to this? And probably not, but it's interesting, is in 2 Kings 19, where Hezekiah falls mortally ill and prays that God will extend his life. And God says, I'll add 15 years to your life, right there, 2 Kings 19. Well, I think my 15-year mark has long passed, and so I think I'm good. That was in 94, I think. So, but that's interesting that happens to be where the Bible was open during that horrible scene. But God was watching out. Regardless of how it happened, the police officer talking to Tammy said I should have been killed. There were people who checked pulse, a nurse right behind me who got in and tried to check a pulse and said she couldn't find one. I don't know, maybe she was out of her element. I don't know, but there were a lot of interesting things that happened. I mentioned Don's file here because it was at this time, right before I finished at Arizona State, I heard that Brother Cox might be retiring. I was about to finish a master's degree. So I started sending information to everyone I could think of in the music department, as well as to Dr. Williams. Send him my resume, send him letters of recommendation. I get a letter back or a phone call. Brother Cox is going to stay on another year. So in the meantime, I found the job at Brownfield High School, was the choir director there for a year. After a year's time, I would start digging again at LCU. What's going on at LCU? I'd send an updated file and letters of recommendation to Dr. Williams. First year rolled around, Brother Cox is going to stay another year. So second year, third year, fourth year. After 4 years, I think it was for real that time. 4 years of sending files to Dr. Williams. And I was told, I think this is right, that after the interview process, and they had talked to several, but the three of us who were candidates, who actually were brought in and said, yes, we want to pursue this, that were actually interviewed, I was the only one with public school experience in choir. I believe that was it. And had it happened on my time, it wouldn't have been time. I wanted to do it right away. I really see that as God's providence in putting things in place the way they were supposed to be lined up. Well, I remember this little campaign I did in 1989. First opportunity I had. I was still directing Meister Singers in 1988, 1999. And we made a campaign to the Philippines. Had an amazing trip there. If you know some of these people, Celeste Scott is right there. Matt Cass on the far end there. He's a college minister at Green Lawn. Sheila Brown, Sheila Deloney's there. Heather Byers now is in that picture. Several others you might recognize. We made a campaign to Mexico in 2000, to Australia, 2001. Dr. Williams got to be a part of that. Then it came time, all that time I was working on my doctorate, and I was the kind of guy that would just do one thing at a time. They told me when I first started the doctorate at Texas Tech that it was, and by the way, I started that at the same time starting at LCU. They told me there were 3 parts and they were really pretty equal, the PhD in music at Texas Tech. 1 part coursework, 1 part qualifying exams, 1 part dissertation. I got the coursework done, got the qualifying exams done. Took about a year to do all the sets of qualifying exams. And then it came time for dissertation. My professor who was working with me, Dr. Kenneth Davis, Director of Choral Activities at the time at Texas Tech, also had a Master of Divinity. So he had an interest already in sacred music and an interest in my background as in the Churches of Christ and how we sing a cappella. And he said, Philip, you ever thought about maybe something in Russian Orthodox tradition? They're a cappella. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that. You could research that a little bit. I thought, you are right. I got real excited. I called my dad up. I said, do you know any contacts in Russia that might help me with this? Of course, he was making trips to Russia all the time. At that time, he had made trips to Dubna, Russia. And this brother's name is Sergei Shishkin. And he's a physicist there in the National Laboratory of Russia in Dubna. Dubna, Russia is to Russia and the former Soviet Union what Los Alamos was and is to the United States. National Laboratory, Sergei works there, so it was a dream come true. I had this contact who was bilingual, spoke English very well, so I could find actual Russian sources, send them to him, he would translate, I'd get them back, and it worked out perfectly. And so my title of my dissertation was on a Russian composer named Alexander Gretchaninov. The field was quite open for a dissertation in this area. Gretchaninov's compositions had been performed in the United States quite often. American choir directors know of his work, but in English. It was in translation in English since about the 1930s. Works like, if you were in chorus, Holy Radiant Light by Gretchaninov, Our Father, Glory to the Only Begotten Son. Those were his works. Well, 2 out of those 3 that I listed were from his second liturgy setting, which to the Russian Orthodox Church is like the Mass is for the Catholic liturgy. And so I wrote about this second liturgy, which had some choruses in that liturgy setting that American choir directors have known in English. I found an essay housed in the New York Public Library for the Performing Arts. Right there near Lincoln Center in the New York Public Library. I found an essay he had written. It was listed in another dissertation I had. 39 pages of essay in Russian. And I found that it was much cheaper for me just to fly up to New York, take digital photographs of the manuscript, email them to Sergei Shishkin in Russia. He translated them, got them back to me, and we would edit. I'd go back and forth. I would edit to where it would read better in English. And as a result, just really had an amazing resource at my fingertips that before then, no one else had any way of getting a hold of. He considered himself a spokesman for the new Russian choral school, this group of musicians in Russia pre-revolution, about 1917. Then he immigrated to the United States shortly after the Russian Revolution, lived in America till he died in 1956, never learned to speak English. And so leading spokesman there. Really was a gold mine, and got a couple of publications out of this. One of them was in our leading journal, the Choral Journal for the American Choral Directors Association. And then one of them also was actually before I completed my dissertation in a publication by the Austin Graduate School of Theology called Christian Studies. And they were doing a publication just on church music. And they wanted me to write about church music from the perspective of the Russian Orthodox tradition. So I published in that article an explanation of why the Russian Orthodox Church has remained a cappella in their practice all of these years. Would you like to know why? Because they like it. They really, they quote often the early church fathers, St. John Chrysostom, St. Augustine, some of the others, Basil, some of the others who lived 2nd, 3rd, 4th century, who often allegorize the passages in the Old Testament. For instance, Psalm 150, praise him with cymbals, praise him with harp, praise him with lyre. They would allegorize that and say, well, that's different parts of the body under the new covenant. That's like we praise God with all of our being, our whole. In fact, St. Augustine himself said, when we worship God, our bodies become a kithara or a harp. Our bodies become that. And so they would allegorize that particular passage and say, well, they're just talking about different parts of your body that we're going to praise God with. That was one aspect of it. The leading expert of Russian choral music in our country lives in San Diego, California. His name is Vladimir Morrison. He owns Musica Rusica, where he publishes choral music from Russian works, and wrote just an amazing dissertation that he published on the subject. He says that in the Russian Orthodox tradition, the whole philosophy behind worship is one-sided, and that is to please God. It's all vertical. It's only to please God. If we wanted to please ourselves, we might bring in instruments. But it's not about that. Worship is about, first and foremost, is about prayer in their tradition. It's not about self-gratification. It's about offering ourselves to God. It's not about what we want. It's about what we want to present to God. So, in his words, instrumental music is like icing on the cake. It's unneeded. It's not needed. It's not necessary. We're just after pleasing him. And when I saw that quote, and I talked to him on the phone about it, and through email correspondence and so on, and in my work and study in the Russian choral music, I realized that's not just it. It's not just the instrumental stylistic restriction, but it infiltrates every part of their style, of the way they write their music. For instance, in our a cappella tradition, I love to sing with Dr. Peebles. I wish he was here today. I love to sing with him, but some of the songs he likes to sing, and we all like to sing, would be unthinkable in the Russian Orthodox tradition. You would never have a bass lead with some catchy alto, tenor, soprano, offbeat rhythms that are fun to do, or an alto lead with the same thing with all the rest. You would never have that. That in itself is sort of an irreverent style. Worship is first and foremost prayer in the Russian Orthodox tradition. And so the style is very sustained, very fluid. You might think often slow. It's not always slow, but often it is. And we're going to sing a piece tonight from Rachmaninoff from the Russian Orthodox liturgy. And it's very expressive in its own right, but also very, very prayerful. Now, they miss the portion in Scripture, the admonition to encourage one another. That part's gone. But there is something to learn about offering our bodies as a living sacrifice, Romans 12, to only present, maybe to be more prayerful in our worship approach. I lost that thought. I was going to go on. Okay, well, I'll go on. Well, so I kept doing campaigns. 2003, we made a trip to Ireland. Really had a fantastic experience. We sang Danny Boy in a pub. You remember that, Don? Oh, they said, you must have Irish blood in you to sing it like that. So they were very gracious as we sang on the streets and did some outreach work there. Also made a trip to Australia, 2005, return trip. My daughter got to go on this one. She was 4 years old. The scene at the airport was not happy. We were all crying when Mom and Lauren and me were all crying as we're leaving each other. But it was a fun time. Got to see Steve Irwin. He was there. Not for our concert. We went to the zoo and saw him. So, right after that experience, my parents were in Austria. Mom, the influence of women on our lives. You only take your choir to English-speaking countries? Well, no, I guess not. So we made a trip, a kind of a survey trip, is what I told the students anyway. But we made a trip to see my parents in Austria, and that's, by the way, when I got to see Ava Ott again, who gave me that first baton. So that led to New York. I don't know how that came. In the meantime, we made a campaign in New York. Eddie Pleasant, somebody who lived in Lubbock, he was involved in that trip as we did some outreach work in New York. 2007 was our first trip to Ukraine and Austria, sang to packed houses in Donetsk, Ukraine. That dissertation topic really proved to be valuable because we sang the pieces that I had worked on in my dissertation. Otche nasz, Our Father, by Gretchen Enough, Glory to the Only Begotten Son, Slava Otcu. And they were received so well. They treated us like they understood every word. And of course, they knew the words already because it was in their language. So that was a tremendous experience. Lots of Bibles. This was all in partnership with Eastern European Mission. It's just, I've known this, but when I see all the things that have come full circle from the very beginning all the way till now, I'm kind of glad I went to the short line at ACU to register in music. 2009 made our second trip there. 2011 also went to Greece, went to Ukraine and to Greece. Did some outstanding work there in Greece, just about wore ourselves out doing outreach and mission-related activities. And then just recently made a return trip this last spring break to 2013. I'm going to wind this up. My favorite story about all these campaigns to Ukraine is about a lady. Here, this picture's in 2009 after a concert. This lady just came up and had a bouquet of flowers with tears running down her cheek, hugged my neck, gave me a bouquet, and I didn't know what to think. Thank you. I didn't know. That's another picture of her. Turns out she is a pediatric cardiologist. Attended her first concert in 2007 when she saw a poster that was printed in Russian. Never really had an interest in choir or choral music. How interesting, an American choir. Came, got her first Bible through contacts. J. Don Rogers here, a missionary, who's also an LCU alum. Contact with him in the church there. She became a Christian after receiving that first Bible. In 2009, she invited all of her staff from the hospital to come and to the concert, and they sent us a very meaningful letter. So that's been just extremely rewarding to be able to participate with Eastern European Mission. The way it's come full circle from Dad getting it started in the early 60s and how that's developed now. Lately, we've had some minor bumps in the road. Our kids like to break their arms. This was, I think, number 4 for Landon and number 5 for Lauren. A number of you, even this year, a number of you have asked me about how my son's health has been doing. You knew that he had an acute case of pancreatitis last year. He went for 3 months without eating or drinking anything, hardly. And ice chips, very seldom. So this picture is of his first meal after that. At Schlotsky's, very low fat. You ever on a low fat diet? Schlotsky's has a sandwich that has very, very, very little fat in it. So for a long time, since then, this was back in what? When was that? June? Maybe May or June. Gradually increased his diet, and now he's doing great. Playing basketball, playing football, eating everything he wants, all the ice cream, all the chocolate he can stand, and we can stand to watch him do. Yesterday, he had a mouthful of Cheetos. We've experienced tremendous blessings as a family, seen God at work through a large part of that, and it's interesting to go back from the very beginning and just see it come full circle. That's my presentation. Thank you.
I remember at some point in your dissertation process, and I'm not sure if it was your comps or whatever, you had to do a concert at First Christian Church.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I just thought that was so interesting about the music PhD. So could you talk
Yeah,
about
for the dissertation, a performance requirement is often included for doctorates in music, for terminal degrees, probably in most of the terminal degrees in music. I know the DMA was actually the Doctor of Musical Arts that Texas Tech started after I finished. I probably would have gone that route had they offered that. You had to give 2 dissertation-related recitals along with a lecture presentation along with that recital. Our requirement was to give a dissertation. I gave 2 doctoral recitals, and then one of those was related to my dissertation. So the praise choir sang several movements from Gretcheninoff's Second Liturgy, which was good for us to do that, and it really impressed the committee that I was on that my choir actually sang that. So that was a fun thing.
Other questions?
Dr. Williams, by the way, sang in that concert as well.
I was just curious, you may have alluded to it, and I might have missed it, but you did ACU undergrad, then ASU.
Yeah,
And
I skipped it.
Why Lubbock? Why LCU? Was it friendships you developed at camps? What attracted you?
Tammy was in medical school,
Okay, sorry.
and we were getting married. Yeah, I went real fast over that part. I was in graduate school at Arizona State, we became engaged while I was at Arizona State, and she was in medical school here at Texas Tech, and so I was coming here. So we really didn't live in the same town ever until we were married. 3 dates together, talked on the phone an awful lot. Before the days of cell phone free roaming, we had some big time phone bills. But that proved to be a good experience.
Other questions?
How often do you go back to Blue Haven? Tell us about Blue Haven.
Okay, yeah, I still go back every summer. We were, in our summers, spent in Texas Tech, worked out a deal both with her and with me in my doctoral studies to where we could have our summers off. And so she is, by the way, the program director for the pediatric residency program now at the Health Sciences Center. And before that, she was associate program director. And we were both able to get off. She was the camp secretary, and I was assistant director for 13 summers after we were married. Before that time, we were teaching some. So we haven't missed a summer really since we've been married. She hasn't missed a summer at least for a week, being up there, or 2 weeks, since 1978. So we both have Blue Haven in our blood. We didn't know each other until we were staff members because we went different sessions as campers. But so now we teach for 2 weeks every summer. So have good affiliation. Occasionally pull in a recruit to LCU from that. So it's always really good. Any other questions?
Talk a little bit about Pepperdine.
Oh, yes. Next week, chamber singers and Dr. Rogers will be going to Pepperdine University's Ascending Voice 3 Vocal Symposium. It's an international symposium on a cappella sacred music. And it involves, if it's any church of any denomination who enjoys a cappella music, they're represented there. Primitive Baptists come in and share their sacred harp tradition of singing. Last time I was there in 2010, a Catholic priest and a composer was there. He wasn't a priest, he was a composer, very, very much involved. And he made, I didn't realize until that time he said the Catholic Church actually prefers it to be a cappella. And we make no qualms about saying that. We realize we have instrumental all the time, but we would rather it be this way. Well, it makes sense. In the Sistine Chapel, it's often a cappella through the centuries. When other churches were doing big concert works with orchestra and big things, Sistine Chapel was still singing music by Allegri, the Renaissance composers who were all a cappella sacred. So chamber singers were invited to sing there to present our program based on audition for we had to send recordings for the last 3 years. So I did that, and we were invited to share in that symposium. We'll be joining a festival chorus as well that will have 4 other colleges coming together in a giant chorus that will be conducted by a well-known conductor in the United States, Alan Hightower. So that'll be a good experience. Best Friends is meeting us on their tour as we share some of the same students. So they're going to be touring up there, doing the symposium with us, and they'll be touring back. So.
And you'll hear that performance tonight.
Tonight, yeah.
To the Rotunda.
Hear a premiere of Dr. Rogers' latest arrangement, Be Thou My Vision. Tremendous arrangement. So invite you to come.
And that is at 7 or 7:30?
7:30. Yes, in the Rotunda.
Well, let's give Philip a hand.
Thank you.